Hello and welcome to the CXO Show, the podcast for C-suite sales and marketing leaders. I'm Joe Birkdale, founder and CEO of Project 36, the strategic marketing agency behind the CXO Show. And in today's episode, we're looking at how best to manage and lead an inherited marketing team. For some of us, we're marketing hire number one, meaning we get to build out our teams, make the hires based on our strategies. But for everybody else, it's likely that you've either been promoted to the leader, in which case you've now got to manage others that may have wanted your job, or you've been brought in from outside the organisation and you've now got to manage others that may have wanted your job, and worse still, manage a team that may have habits, loyalties or processes that they are reluctant to drop. So our question is, how do we manage an inherited team? How do we work out who the top performers of that team are? And how do you make your mark and get them to follow your strategy? So to discuss this with me, I have my guest speaker and head of marketing at Rainbird. Rainbird, or Rainbird AI for anyone wanting to look them up, is an AI-powered intelligent automation software. Our conversation today promises to be a fascinating mix of insight and discovery, and I'm really looking forward to it. So Timi Olotu, welcome to the CXO Show.
Thanks for having me here, Joe.
All right, so can you explain to me the structure of your marketing team at Rainbird? How big is it? Where do they operate? And what's really the underwriting remit?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my marketing team is a combination of in-house team members and a couple of agencies, all of them inherited. And it's made up of a videographer / multimedia specialist, a content writer / copywriter, a marketing manager / coordinator. So those are the in-house team members. And then we have a PR agency and a design agency. And the remit of the team is essentially to create a scalable and predictable commercial engine for growing sales and revenue, and of course profitability. So in the broadest possible terms, although I think saying make money can be a bit simplistic, but that's what it's about. It's about understanding the levers we can pull and exploit to generate that scalability and predictability and profitability in revenue generation. I think those three prerequisites are important to stress.
Yeah, and what we're seeing with a lot of our clients is this merger of sales and marketing. Sales is obviously revenue generating, seen as a profit center. Marketing historically is seen as a cost center. We're seeing more and more marketing teams move from cost center to profit center in vision. And in fact, you've got this whole new term being coined by a few organizations now of revenue operations, which is basically the amalgamation of the two. And I think that's where our worlds are going to collide, if you like, and end up being one and the same thing. And you get a lot of CFOs or chief revenue officers kind of model that, where they've got sales and marketing reporting to the CROs. So it's interesting to hear how you, as I say, a lot of our clients, it's not only is it scalable and predictable, it's the profitability and the actual cash that's coming out of these campaigns, which is now much more important that they're tracked. And of course, with digital, we can track from first interaction through to close of deal and share of value and so on, and influence along the way. So how big's the team? You say you've got content writers, marketing manager. How many people are there?
In-house, 4, including myself, and with 2 kind of agency partners.
2 agencies on the side, yeah. So you mentioned that everything you've got there at Rainbird is inherited. So you've inherited the 2 agencies, you've inherited your 3 other staff. How do you manage them? How do you stamp your mark on that team and make your, as Steve Jobs once said, put your dink in the universe? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's a good question and a kind of multivariate one. I'll start by saying I think leadership styles and personality styles play a huge part in how people go about this early phase, if you will. So for me, my leadership style is very democratic. It's very performance oriented, in the sense that what makes me happy is not what It's not that someone on my team does things the way I would do them. It's more that they do things that work, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yep, totally.
So I would say those are the two things that define my style. And the third thing is very communicative. So I like to share as much information as possible and to receive as much information as possible, because I think information is a crucial factor in decision making. You can't expect people in your team to make good decisions if you have way more information than they do. They're going to make information based on the context they have. So moving on to like the heart of your question from that, I would say the thing that I focus on, the way that I frame it in my head, is not to think about it as making my mark or stamping my identity, so to speak, on the team. It's on helping everyone on the team understand the importance of having a way of doing things, of having an identity, a DNA, if you will, and involving them in the process of shaping and creating what that DNA is. Of course, with a democratic approach, you can't, how can I put it? You can't delegate every decision to every member of your team. The team still need leaders. So what I tend to do is to break down the concept. All right, we're a marketing team. Here are our goals. Here are the attributes we're going to need to be successful in achieving those goals. Here's a part that you all play in it, as I see it. Here is my approach. Here's what I think would be a good way of dealing with this. What do you think? Is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything you'd like to add? So come with something. Come with a baseline. And of course, this plays out over a series of conversations. So the first thing that I do the first 2 times I've inherited team members is to have one group meeting and one-on-one meetings with each of them, where I'm not so much talking about what I plan to do or how I think. I'm just asking them questions like, how have you found it so far? What has it been like before I came here? What did you like? What didn't you like? What kind of trajectory do you see yourself going on, etc.? How do you define marketing? What do you see the role of this thing as? I think one mistake a lot of people can make is, and I've seen this multiple times in my own career, is when someone new comes in, especially if they're very senior, is to assume that anything that's gone on before them must be crap. It's stupid, it didn't work, and there's nothing for me to learn from what went on before. Well, that for me is a very very dangerous way of going about things, because if not for any other reason, you need context. You need to understand what the status quo is. What condition are you meeting people in, if nothing else? And a lot of the time, you'll find that there was actually some good in what was going on before, and your job becomes partly to understand how to separate what's good about the status quo from what's bad. So I would wrap all of that up in saying what it does is, first of all, it gets people feeling involved. It gets people believing that you are on their team. Because if your team is not on your team, you have a problem. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how good you are, etc. If from the very beginning people are resisting you, you've already messed up. It's going to make everything way harder. So I would say that's the first, to make people feel like you are a team. I think that's the first objective. While in the background, you are collecting data about what's going on, why is it going on, what's bad, what's good, and what you need to do next as a leader to achieve your goals. This is all assuming, of course, that you have already spoken to your managers, your leaders, and you've agreed with them what the imperatives of the marketing function are.
Absolutely, it's top-down mentality. You've got to understand what the big wigs, what they want. I mean, I've always gone into a new organisation with at least a 90-day plan, but then I've shared that plan, and I've kind of said, right, this is the vision or the mission of to where I would like it to go. Now I need you to ask questions, interrogate. Let's change and adapt that. let's get that to a position we're all comfortable with. And then now we've all bought into it, let's go and deliver that. So you kind of have to leave your ego at the door. To come back on the point where you said where you don't need to just change it for the sake of it. If you leave your ego at the door and assume the person before you has left on good terms because they were doing a good job, they've just had another opportunity, then why would you change it? Because you're potentially going to unpick and upset. And don't forget, there's the politics there that these people may have worked with your predecessor for many, many years and have loyalties and could throw a spanner in the works if they wanted to. And as I said on the intro, they may have wanted your job. They may have gone for that job.
Yeah.
So now you need to lead with empathy and strength, but you need to lead with empathy as well, and to demonstrate why they weren't quite ready. They're your potential top performers in the future, which brings me to our next question, really. How do you work out those top performers? And in a previous agency, I was inheriting a team. It was a fairly small team, about 4 or 5 people, but I had no idea who was who. I've got job titles, or they had job titles. They didn't seem appropriate. So I quickly looked at the work that we'd got to go out that week. This is on week 1, day 1. Most of it didn't have a deadline that was particularly pressing. So I asked them all to go and do a presentation on any subject matter in the world that mattered to them. Could be ballet, could be football, could be work, whatever they wanted. And then talk me through that presentation at the end of the week. Because I just wanted to get an understanding of how they acted. Were any of them client facing? Could I position them as an account manager or an account director? Were they in the right position within the agency? Were they in the wrong position? And just to get a feel for them and let them have a little bit of pressure, sure, but let them control the narrative. And, you know, would they all come up with something different, or would they work together on it and just see if they were playing, you know, teams of one, or were they going to group together and go, well, this is what I'm doing, what are you going to do? And it was really interesting exercise because they grouped together. They presented individually, but they presented something that was very similar and gave broad coverage. So it really helped me position them, but it also helped me spot the top performers. And one junior marketing administrator was quite clearly far, far, far below where she needed to be in the business. And she was a strong account director, very strong account director. But for whatever reason, confidence wasn't there. There was a conflict with the previous boss. And so by doing that little exercise within a week, I was able to start then working on, well, why isn't her confidence where it needs to be? Because I've got a really strong asset within the team. So that's how I kind of worked out where my top performers were initially. Obviously things change and you bring in hires, but how do you manage an inherited team and spot those top performers and work out who they are?
Yeah, that's also a good question. I think I'm going to add a little nuance. I think whether or not that question is important depends on the kind of team you're inheriting and the circumstances under which you're inheriting it. So if you're inheriting an underperforming team in a toxic culture, so then I would say identifying the top performers is super critical, because it is almost accepted that you will have to make some tough decisions in terms of personnel and in terms of who you're going to take on the journey with you as you move into a brighter future, if that's not too cliche. But if you're inheriting a team that is, how can I put it? It's nothing wrong per se. Like you said, maybe the previous leader found a better opportunity and went for it, or maybe it's just early in its development, so that those kinds of hardcore dynamics haven't yet emerged. Then I would say I focus less on identifying top performers and focus more on identifying strengths, shall we say. So what is this person good at, and what are they not so good at least at this point in time, keeping in mind that I believe most people can develop into most skills. So if it's going back to the former scenario, if it's a toxic team in a toxic culture, then I think something like the exercise you described, if it's an underperforming team in a toxic culture, that could be very useful. And I take something of a similar approach, not as structured, but essentially getting people to present to me about some aspect of their work or something like that, where I can then see how they think through things, what's their approach, do they do the bare minimum, or do they try and excel, do they focus on the outcome, or do they just focus on the process? All those kinds of attributes I look for to try and understand, all right, who is engaged, and who is highly skilled, because I think there are two dimensions to star players. There are more, but let's simplify it to two. One is their kind of attitude, and the other is their kind of aptitude. So is someone really good at what they're doing, and do they have the right mentality and emotional predisposition to applying themselves in the performance of their role? And if it's not a situation where the team is underperforming or in a toxic culture, then what I try and do is create a sense of psychological safety so people are comfortable talking to me about their weaknesses as well as their strengths. And what I want to know is, what have you been doing up till now? Talk me through it. And in that process, I'm assessing, how well are they doing it? How engaged are they about it, etc. And then I ask them to tell me, rather than go off my own assumptions, like, okay, what have you enjoyed the most about what you've been doing so far? What have you not enjoyed so far? What would you rather not do from this point onward? What do you see as your weakness? What do you see as your strength, etc.? And then what I try and do is basically start everyone off in a position of assumed competence. Like, after that conversation, what you tell me, what we agree your strengths are, we're going to try and orient the work you do towards all those things. And I'm going to assume that you're super strong at all those things. And then we're going to work from there. You will either maintain that standard, or you will give me reason to doubt it. And then we take it from there. Then we deal with those kinds of issues through one-on-ones, open conversations, etc. But the reason why I introduced that nuance is because if there isn't already a sense of what's it called? Of vulnerability or cutthroatness or anything like that in the team, then I would rather not introduce it, because confidence also affects performance. And if people start feeling scared or anxious and all those things, then it might affect the picture of them that I get, if that makes sense.
No, it does, absolutely. And I think in terms of confidence, these unprecedented times that we're in right now, with effectively a near global shutdown, confidence is probably, for employees at least, at an all-time low, because they don't know if they're going to be furloughed one minute, laid off, business as usual. I mean, there's pockets of business out there that's flying. If you've got shares in Zoom, I'm sure you're going to be doing very well quite soon. Yes. However, if you're on the high street doing retail, not so much. So
exactly.
And these teams, they feel that their partners might be in a different business. They're obviously working from home now. You've got all the pressures and stresses of childcare. So is there anything new that you're going to be doing to manage your inherited team based on the effective social crisis that we're finding ourselves? Are you changing the way you're working at the moment with your team?
Subtle things, like we're having more video calls, of course, to your point about Zoom. I'm being, and I'm asking them to be more explicit in the things we say to each other, because, there's so much informational value that isn't being carried across when you're not talking to people in person. So there's a lot more room, when most of your conversation is through chat with video calls sometimes, there's much more room for misunderstanding. And that's not good. Of course, it can introduce unnecessary tension. So it's just, let's be more literal about everything we say and much more explicit. And also, this is more, I won't take full credit for this, but this is more of a company-wide effort. Just having more, I guess, options for more social interactions. So not just, I want to talk to you about this specific task, but let's just catch up because, you want to talk to me in general about anything.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, a lot of my clients, particularly the larger enterprise clients, they're finding that on Slack channels, Microsoft Teams, they're getting little breakaway groups,
Hmm.
and they're doing formally promoted within the organisation coffee breaks. So at
Hmm.
11 o'clock or 10:30 globally, a Zoom room will open up,
Hmm.
and you'll have 20 people in there drinking a cup of coffee, having a chat. Maybe somebody they've never spoken to has just dropped in on that meeting because they want to see another face. They want to talk about something other than work. They
Yes.
are potentially lonely. And that's the thing. With everybody working remotely, the capacity for most organizations, certainly in the marketing and services industry, to adapt from a practical level is quite high. We can all, conference and do Zoom calls and so on. But the mentality and the personality type that likes to work remotely doesn't necessarily transfer over. So with Project 36, our entire infrastructure is remote, always has been. And so the mentality and the culture of remote working is already there. Yet with other organizations, they've now been forced to shift to being remote. You've got to potentially unpick, depending on the person's career span, it could be 20 to 30 years of the morning routine of get up, get dressed, commute, drive for an hour. And it's very social to not have to do that and to have to just literally walk downstairs to your office. That can be unsettling for a lot of people. So the lack of human interaction can be massive. And with all the video chats in the world, it still doesn't replicate human need for being part of a group. And so we're starting to see these groups pop up here, there, and everywhere for coffee mornings. Last night I'm a member of a membership group where we will join up twice a month. Last night we did it on Zoom. Everybody got beers and crisps sitting in their various lounges or whatever, and we just did a quiz, an online quiz, because we couldn't meet up. Um,
Mm.
so there's this need, this human need to be part of a group. So I think that factors into where we are today. And how do you make your mark and get your team to follow your strategy at Rainbird?
Another very good question. The first thing I try and do is keep my emotions in check in either direction, because I've seen this kind of compromise a lot of leaders, and such a subtle thing. It's a personal, internal thing, but it's very important. If you get overexcited when you start a new job and you're too fired up to be a hero, you're going to make a lot of stupid mistakes, because your orientation will be towards doing things that are fundamentally traceable to you as a person, me.
Yeah,
And that's
that's
gonna
really
first,
good advice. That's very good advice.
that's gonna come across first of all to the leadership and your team, and also it's gonna make you miss opportunities to do things that aren't about you. And I've seen this a lot. I've even had leaders confide in me about this. Oh, that person's good, but they just seem too eager to kind of be the hero in every situation. So that's the first thing I do. But also not to become too what's the word, draconian or negative emotionally as well, while looking at everything going, okay, I'm new, everything is bad, you know, all that kind of stuff. Even if your motivation is not to be a hero, if you go with that kind of attitude, it's going to screw everything up. Because
Yeah.
then, as we covered, you might pull apart things that are actually good. You infect your team and the leadership with that negativity. Don't forget the people who hired you are very busy people as well. As busy as you are, they are incredibly busy. And what they want is someone who takes things off their plate, who gives them reasons to be happy, to be positive about this business that they've invested their time, emotion, life, money into, not someone who brings them down. So that's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing is to actually, it's wrapped up. I'll just wrap it up in three things. First of all, be very meticulous. Explain every decision you make. That's what I do. Explain the foundational reasoning underlying your decision. If you say, "Oh, we should start setting up our goals in Google Analytics in this way rather than that way," explain why. What's going on? What's the evidence show the evidence for why what you're suggesting is good and even better than how things have already been done. Second of all, introduce as much data as possible so that the conversation is not so much about what you want to do, it's about what is productive to do. Like, okay, analyzing this, given our goals, what are the ways we need to adapt our behavior and our approach in order to reach those goals? So the less people feel that what you're saying is personal or tied to your ego, the less they are to antagonize you for no reason. And which brings me to the third point, which is be open. Allow people to question what you're doing. And in fact, this is one of the two things that I try and do very early on when I start a new job is if someone points out something about what you're doing that could be better and they give a better suggestion, very publicly acknowledge that and incorporate it. Let people see that you're not afraid of admitting that you're imperfect and of incorporating new information when it proves to be more rigorous than what you previously suggested. And what that means is, I think you create an atmosphere of how can I put it? A progress-oriented atmosphere. So people feel that everything you're doing is about moving closer to a goal in a very obvious way, rather than about you imposing your will. And what you're also doing is you're setting a standard for communication and for a way of working. You're setting a standard that says, first of all, you should be meticulous. If you're going to deal with me, be meticulous. If you're going to deal with me, bring evidence, bring data. Don't just try and impose your will. And also be open. Don't be closed, because you have now enshrined those rules in your behavior. And I find that doing those three things actually removes so much friction. I have never really, apart from one time I can think, which I won't name, I've never really struggled to get people to follow what I'm saying, because a lot of the time, and this is feedback I've gotten from people I've managed or I've worked with or from people who have managed me, it doesn't feel like I'm trying to force them to do something. It feels like it's inevitable. Well, if we want to get there, then it's obvious this is what we need to do. And also people feel like they had the opportunity to disagree and to improve upon the suggestion. So then it feels like my strategy is our strategy, as corny as that sounds.
No, that's some really good points there. And that brings us nicely onto our last section, really. In every episode of the CXO show, we ask our guests to give us 3, 4, 5 top tips. And I think some of the ones you've just read out are going to feature here. Some takeaway pieces of info that other sales and marketing leaders can think about, adapt, and possibly adopt into their own specific work scenario. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, would you mind sharing your top tips for managing an inherited team?
Sure. I would say one of the big ones is don't pretend to know everything. Even if you think you do, don't come across that way, because first of all, it's counterproductive. If you have specialists in your team, you want those specialists to come across as the best people in their specialism. You don't want to create the impression of, across a business that you are a manager of incompetent people. You might think that stink is only going to be on that person, but actually it's going to be on you as well, because you as a leader are now responsible not just for your identity, you're responsible for the identity of your team. So it's important that you allow the specialists, the experts in your team to be experts and to allow them to grow. If people in your team aren't growing, if you constantly have to step in, if you constantly have to correct things, if you constantly feel like you can't trust them, then you failed as a manager. Of course, sometimes that needs to happen in the very beginning, but you should be working towards having as little of that as possible. Also, it increases the confidence in your team, which I believe is strongly tied to performance. So if your team feels like you trust them to be really good at what they do, and that's what you're trying to help them become, then they're going to rise up to that image of them that you have constructed. But if you create an image, if you project a perception of them that you think they're incompetent, you're better than them at everything, and they don't know how to do things well, and that is the image to which they will align. And then the second thing I would say is to push back on your managers, your leaders, execs, founders, whatever they may be, when necessary. This is another common mistake I see, and it's because, unfortunately, I have to say, this is perhaps a very abrasive and unusual opinion to share, but I think a lot of marketers are very incompetent in one of the most important areas of marketing, which is communication about performance, about what is important in marketing and what is not. And how do we know that this is important and that this is not? Of course, some of that ties to metrics and data, but a lot of it also ties to marketing theory, actually, marketing principles and how they translate into practical activities. So because a lot of marketing leaders are missing those two things, first of all, data literacy and competence, if you will, but also theoretical grounding, they revert to trying to please people. They see their job as making the CEO happy or the founder happy or whomever it may be. That's a problem because those people are not marketing experts. And they might tell you to do things that are terrible for effective marketing. And if you go ahead and do it and it fails, what's going to happen is they're not going to say, oh, well, I told you to do that, so it's okay. They're going to say, what's going on with your marketing function? Why is it performing so badly? And I've seen people, multiple people, fired because of this. So you have to diplomatically, empathetically, and with an attitude of educating them rather than antagonizing them, push back when they say things or when they suggest things that aren't good, that aren't going to lead to effective results for the business. And then the third thing I would say is think digital plus traditional. There is this ridiculous dichotomy that is playing out in marketing at the moment where people are pooling into camps where they're either like traditional marketing, madmen, 4Ps, and big strategic campaigns, or it's growth hacking, data, spreadsheets, all that kind of stuff. And people see those two things as separated, and it affects the way they structure their teams and the kinds of how can I put it, the values that with which they imbue their teams. And that for me is such a silly mistake. They're all tools. They're just different manifestations of the same principles, different pieces of equipment to try and achieve the same goals. Fuse them together, think through the whole picture, and encourage your team to think the same way, because then they will develop a broader set of skills, a deeper well of competence, as well as kind of improving the performance of the business. And then the fourth thing is measure as much as you can, but don't be a slave to data. So this is another thing people seem to have an issue with that I don't understand. You can measure a lot of things. You can collect a lot of data. You can analyze a lot of data, but that doesn't mean you have to kind of slavishly follow very linear interpretations of data. Like some of the biggest successes in history have been non-linear or unconventional interpretations of data. So you collect as much data as possible, because the more information you have, the more variables you incorporate into your decision making, which theoretically and in practice for me should improve the quality of your decision making. You're seeing a greater resolution of the picture in front of you, and that's what you want. But don't then turn data into a stick to beat people over the head with. Like, I've worked in places where if you couldn't run an A/B test on something, then you couldn't do anything. It was impossible to move forward unless you could A/B test. And that's just silly. That's not the right way to do things. There's so many There's so many other ways to learn about the world than just A/B testing and analytics. And you need to open your mind to all those ways. But it also helps. You need that foundation of data to have strategic conversations. And then the final thing I would say is be a multiplier. And I get this from a book that was recommended to me by one of the best managers I've ever had, which is a lady called Kirsty Bell, who's now head of marketing at a company called Fuse. And she bought me this book called Multipliers. And it's all about how some managers seem to have a multiplier effect on the people around them. Everyone who works with them seems to perform better. It's not that the manager themselves is performing better. It's just that when people work with them, they seem to become a better version of them. They seem to be doing things that no one thought they could do. And some people are not, I've forgotten the term, but some people are not multipliers. Whenever people start working with them, they become worse. They become depressed. They become less confident, etc. Even if that manager themselves is increasing their own performance, people around them don't have the same effect. The essence of this piece of advice is be a multiplier. When you're a leader, think about the effect you're having on the people around you, not just what is happening with you in a very kind of narcissistic and self-involved way. Think about what the people around you need to perform at their best and be a source of those conditions. Be someone who creates those conditions, who allows people to express their strongest and most developed attributes so that they can grow, so that they can shine. And I know this from experience. When people on your team are shining, if you have a reputation of being someone who is a multiplier, that whenever people work with you, things just seem to go so much better. They seem to perform so much better. That is the most important thing for increasing your stock internally. The halo effect you get is incomparable to anything else.
Well, I think everybody listening can unreservedly say some really, really good bits of advice there. I think, not pushing back up the chain when you get tidbits of information or marketing strategy and advice from a CEO, maybe laugh and chortle because it's been there, done that. And it's really, really relevant. And the be a multiplier, I think that's really relevant as well, because ultimately you're only one person. So if your whole team can do better, then it stands to reason that you're the sum of all the parts, and the whole team performance can increase. So there you have it. Timi's top tips on how you can manage an inherited marketing team. And this brings us to the close of today's podcast. Timi, thank you very much. That was fantastic.
Thank you, Joe. It was a pleasure.
So I hope we have been able to give you some pointers on how you can adapt to and successfully manage your team. Remember to check back for the next episodes and subscribe to the podcast via your favourite app. We're on Spotify, Apple, Google, TuneIn, and many, many more. You can also check us out online at thecxo.show, where you can see a schedule of upcoming episodes, guest speakers, recordings of previous episodes, and even submit your suggestions for topics to be covered. So head to thecxo.show. The CXO Show is recorded, produced, and managed by Project 36. And what you might not know is that a video version of this podcast is also available. Built and produced with our video and webinar partners at 23.net, the video of this episode features closed caption subtitles so you can read along without needing speakers or headphones, and it also has extra information like links to resources and other content assets mentioned in the episode. The video is available now, so please check it out at thecxo.show. Until next time, goodbye and thanks for tuning in.